By the time my son told me he was getting married, I had already learned that adult children had a talent for making life-changing announcements sound like calendar updates. September 26th, Dylan said, sliding a folder across my kitchen table. Newport. Small ceremony. Nothing insane. I opened the folder. There were 3 venue estimates, 2 photographer contracts, a color palette, and a spreadsheet with enough tabs to qualify as a federal investigation. Nothing insane, I repeated. Dylan grinned. At 29, he had inherited my ability to look composed while quietly over-engineering everything. The difference was that he seemed happy about it. Erin, his fiancé, sat beside him, with one ankle across the opposite knee, wearing the patient expression of a man who had already heard every version of this argument. "We're trying to keep both families from turning this into a military campaign," Erin said. "You brought me a spreadsheet. That's Dylan." Dylan pointed at him. "You made the guest map. That was practical. There are arrows. People need circulation." I looked between them and felt something warm settle under my ribs. They were ridiculous. They were also very much in love. 7 years earlier, when my own marriage had ended, I had worried more than I admitted about what Dylan would take from it. He had been 22 then, old enough to understand that his fathers still cared about each other, and young enough for the ending to shake whatever assumptions he had about permanence. Apparently he had recovered well enough to create a guest flow diagram. "So," I said, turning another page, "where do I come in?" Dylan and Erin exchanged a look. I disliked that immediately. "What?" "We want the parents to have dinner together," Dylan said. "The parents. You and Erin's dad. His name is Rob. I know his name. You've never met him. I've heard of him." Erin laughed. "That sounds vaguely threatening." It wasn't. Rob Kessler had existed in my life for 3 years as a collection of second-hand facts. He owned a custom furniture workshop in Pawtucket. He had raised Erin with his husband, Michael, who had died 6 years earlier. He made the dining table in Dylan and Erin's apartment. He hated commercially bottled salad dressing for reasons no one had ever successfully explained. According to Dylan, he could repair anything made of wood, and almost nothing manufactured after 1995. He also, apparently, had opinions about wedding chairs. "Dinner where?" I asked. "Our place. Sunday," Erin added. "And before either of you asks, no, you are not being assigned wedding jobs. That means Rob already asked." Erin looked toward the ceiling. "Once," Dylan said. "3 times. He likes projects. I direct operations for a symphony. I also like projects. Exactly why we're setting boundaries now." I closed the folder. Sunday. Dylan leaned over and kissed my cheek like he was 6 instead of 29. "Thank you." "For what?" "For behaving." "I haven't done anything yet. That's what I mean." Sunday evening, I arrived 7 minutes late because I had spent 12 minutes changing shirts for reasons I preferred not to examine. That irritated me. This was dinner with my son, his fiancé, and his fiancé's father, not a date. Not remotely adjacent to a date. I had known gay men all my life. I worked in the arts. Half my social calendar consisted of fundraisers where someone inevitably wore velvet before the weather justified it. There was no reason to think about a shirt. Dylan opened the door before I knocked. "You're late. By 7 minutes. You're never late. Are you going to let me inside?" He stepped aside. "Rob's here." I hated the tiny flicker of awareness that went through me. Then I saw him. Rob Kessler stood near the kitchen island talking to Erin, one hand wrapped around a glass of wine. He was taller than I expected, broad through the shoulders without looking gym-built, with dark hair gone heavily silver at the temples, and a short beard that made him look both rougher and more approachable than the photographs I had seen. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. That detail was unnecessarily effective. His hands looked exactly like the hands of a man who spent his days making things. Strong fingers, small pale scars, a fresh nick across one knuckle. I noticed all of that before he turned. Then he smiled. "Scott." There was something unsettling about hearing my name in a stranger's voice, when the stranger had clearly been told enough about me to recognize me immediately. "Rob." We shook hands. His grip was warm and firm, without making a statement about itself. "You're real," he said. I looked at him. Erin groaned softly behind us. Rob glanced over. "What?" "You promised not to say that." "I promised I'd try not to say that." I looked at Erin. Should I be concerned? No, Aaron said. Yes, Dylan said at the same time. Rob laughed. It was a good laugh. Low, open, slightly too loud for the room. I've heard about you for years, he said. At some point, you become suspicious. Someone might be fictional. That explains a great deal about how I feel regarding you. His eyebrows lifted. Good. That single word landed with more weight than it deserved. Dinner began safely. Weather. Newport traffic. Whether Dylan and Aaron were making a terrible mistake by seating two elderly aunts near the jazz quartet, Rob was easy company. Easier than I had expected. He did not dominate conversation, but silence did not seem to scare him. He told stories with his whole body, hands moving, shoulders turning, expression changing before he reached the point. At some point, Dylan accused him of making the ceremony sign too large. It's 40 inches, Rob said. For a sign. For a visible sign. We're getting married, not opening an airport. You'll thank me when nobody gets lost. People can see the ocean from the venue. People get lost in grocery stores. I laughed. Rob looked at me immediately. Not because I was the only person laughing, because he wanted to see if I was. That was the first moment I became aware of his attention, as something separate from general friendliness. I looked away first. After dinner, Dylan and Aaron disappeared into the bedroom because the venue coordinator called about some problem involving candles. Rob and I remained at the table. The room became oddly quiet without them. I expected Rob to get up. He didn't. Instead, he leaned back and studied me for a moment. So, do we have to keep talking about the wedding? Relief escaped me as a laugh. God, no. Excellent. He lifted his wine glass. To not talking about our children for 5 minutes. I lifted mine. Ambitious. We drank. Then he asked, how long have you been with the symphony? 14 years. That's a long time. It is. You like it? The question was so ordinary that I nearly gave him the ordinary answer. I love the work. Great organization. Challenging season ahead. Instead I said, most days. Rob nodded, as though that were the better answer. What about the other days? I looked at him. He smiled slightly. You don't have to answer that. No, it's fine. The other days I spend 6 hours solving problems nobody knows exist. Then someone asks why the printed programs cost so much. He laughed. You sound like Aaron. How? He says I spend 30 hours building a table, and then get personally offended when someone asks why it costs more than one from a warehouse. Do you? Yes. At least you're honest. I'm trying something new. There was no reason the line should have sounded flirtatious. It did. I became suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. Not close, exactly. Normal dining table distance. But without Dylan and Aaron there, the geometry of the room had changed. Rob rested his forearms on the table. You've been divorced a while? There was nothing invasive in his tone. 7 years. Friends? With my ex? He nodded. Mostly. We were together 18 years. You don't erase that because the marriage stopped working. Rob's expression softened, but he did not offer sympathy. I appreciated that. And you? I asked. His thumb moved once along the side of his glass. Michael died 6 years ago. I'm sorry. Thank you. A pause. Then he said, I still hate when people lower their voice when I say that. I realized I had. He noticed my realization and smiled. It happens. I'm sorry. Don't be. I just like saying his name at normal volume. That told me more about Rob than a polished grief speech would have. I nodded. Michael. Exactly. From the bedroom, Dylan shouted something about deposits. Aaron shouted back that he knew. Rob looked toward the hallway, then back at me. You raised him mostly here? Dylan? Providence, yes. He talks about you a lot. I narrowed my eyes. Good things? Mostly. Mostly. He says you pretend not to care about details and then remember every detail. That is defamatory. He also said, you'd say something like that. I smiled despite myself. There it was again. That sense that Rob was looking at me a little too directly. Not aggressively, not even confidently. Interested. I knew interest when I saw it. I had simply not expected to see it across my son's dining table. Dylan and Aaron finally returned, both talking at once. Rob sat back. The moment closed, but it did not disappear. An hour later, as I was putting on my coat, Rob stood near the door. We survived. Barely. Apparently we're good at this. Dinner? Being fathers without taking over. I glanced toward Dylan. He was absolutely listening. So far. Rob opened the door for me. Then, quietly enough that Dylan could not hear, he added, I liked the part where we stopped being fathers for 5 minutes. I looked at him. His smile was smaller now, less social. So did I. I walked downstairs before I could make anything more complicated than it already was. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was reviewing a budget forecast. Unknown number. I answered. Scott Delaney. Rob Kessler. I sat back in my chair. You acquired my number quickly. Aaron gave it to me. Should I be concerned about that? He made me promise I actually had a reason to call. Do you? I made the ceremony sign. The airport sign. That joke is already tired. It has years left. He laughed. Then he asked me a perfectly reasonable question about whether my car could transport the sign to Newport if needed. I answered. We discussed measurements. We solved the problem. There was a pause. Well, I said. Anything else? Yes. His voice changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Dinner. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen without seeing it. Dinner. With me. There was a small, ridiculous surge of anticipation low in my chest. I kept my voice even. As the fathers? Rob was silent for half a second. Then he said, I was hoping dinner as Scott and Rob. I smiled before I could stop myself. That sounds potentially complicated. I know. And you're asking anyway. I am. I turned my chair toward the window. Providence moved below me in late afternoon traffic. I thought of Dylan, Aaron, September, family photographs that had not happened yet, holiday dinners none of us had planned. Then I thought of Rob, leaning across the table after our sons left the room, and asking what happened on the days I did not like my job. I said, Thursday. His answer came immediately. Thursday. I arrived at the restaurant 6 minutes early. That was enough time to make me regret the shirt again. Not the same shirt. A different shirt. I had also spent too long choosing. I was still deciding whether that constituted a pattern when Rob came through the door. He wore dark jeans, a charcoal button-down, and no jacket despite the cool evening air. His hair looked slightly less controlled than it had at Dylan and Aaron's apartment, which somehow made him more attractive. That annoyed me too. Then he saw me. The expression on his face changed immediately, not dramatically. Just enough that I knew I had not imagined anything. Hi, he said. Hi. For half a second, neither of us moved. Then Rob laughed under his breath. We're doing a terrible job of making this normal. I thought normal was the objective. No, dinner was the objective. That sounds suspiciously healthy. I have occasional episodes. We sat. The restaurant was small and busy. The kind of place where the tables were close enough that you could hear other people's opinions about dessert. Rob glanced around. Good choice. You told me to choose. I know. That's why I'm complimenting myself. You are very comfortable with unjustified confidence. It saves time. The waiter arrived, and for several minutes we performed the ordinary ritual of ordering food and pretending there was nothing unusual about two men whose sons were about to marry each other, going on a first date. Once the menus were gone, Rob folded his hands on the table. So, you say that a lot. It's useful. For people who have not prepared a sentence. Exactly. He smiled. Then his expression shifted. Do you want to talk about the obvious thing? That depends which obvious thing. Our sons. I nodded. Eventually. That was my hope too. The answer surprised me. Rob noticed. What? I assumed you'd want to establish rules. Do you? I like rules. I know. You've known me 12 minutes. Aaron described you as a man who once made Dylan send a calendar invitation for Thanksgiving. That is not accurate. Rob waited. I made him send one because he changed the time 3 times. Rob leaned back, satisfied. Thank you. For what? For proving Aaron right. This is why our children should not be discussed. Agreed. And somehow we actually stopped. We talked about work first. Rob's workshop occupied an old brick industrial building with high windows, unreliable heat, and a landlord he described as philosophically opposed to preventative maintenance. He had started with repairs and cabinetry in his 20s, then moved into custom furniture when he discovered he liked building something once more than fixing the same bad design repeatedly. You make it sound very noble, I said. It isn't. Cabinets are annoying. That feels closer to the truth. What about you? Were you always planning to run a symphony? I don't run the symphony. Operations director. Yes. So you run everything except the music. That is disturbingly close to accurate. He smiled. I told him about beginning in arts administration after college, expecting it to be temporary, then discovering I liked the strange combination of people, logistics, money, egos, and impossible deadlines. Sounds stressful. It is. You like stress. I like fixing things before anyone else knows they're broken. Rob watched me for a moment. That sounds useful. The word landed strangely. I picked up my wine. It is. He did not pursue it. I appreciated that more than I expected. Somewhere between the first course and the second glass of wine, the date stopped feeling like a situation requiring management. Rob told me about a client who had once insisted a dining table needed to feel emotionally coastal. I told him about a donor who demanded to know why the orchestra could not simply perform Beethoven's Ninth, 20 minutes faster. He laughed so hard at that he had to put down his fork. I liked watching him laugh. There was no sophisticated way to explain it. Rob's whole face changed. His eyes narrowed. His shoulders loosened. He stopped looking 55 and started looking like someone whose age had nothing to do with the energy coming off him. I realized I had been staring. He caught me. What? Nothing. That was definitely something. You laugh loudly. Are you criticizing me? I'm observing. That sounds like criticism wearing a tie. You're not wearing a tie. You know what I mean. I smiled. So do you date much? He asked. The question was direct enough that I nearly laughed. Apparently you don't believe in transitions. I warned you about preparing sentences. I considered it. Not much. Because I'm 52. I work too much. And dating apps make me feel like I'm selecting patio furniture. Rob nodded thoughtfully. Finish? Exactly. Dimensions? Stop. Indoor or outdoor use? I laughed. Your turn. His expression softened slightly. I've dated. Since Michael? Yes. He said the name normally, just as he had promised. A few times. Nothing terrible. Nothing particularly lasting either. Why not? He rubbed one thumb along the edge of his napkin. I don't know. That answer interested me more than something polished would have. You don't know? I could give you reasons. Timing. Distance. Different lives. One guy was weird about Aaron. How? Tried too hard. I waited. Rob looked down at the table. He wanted Aaron to like him immediately. Kept offering advice. Inviting him places. Acting like dating me came with an audition for a role nobody had posted. That sounds exhausting. It was. And the others? He shrugged. They were good men. But being good isn't always the same as fitting. I understood that. More than I wanted to. My ex is a good man. Rob looked at me. Daniel? I blinked. You know his name too? Aaron talks. Apparently everyone talks except me. That's what I'm trying to fix. The sentence was light. The way he looked at me wasn't. I felt the shift again. The distance between us was not actually smaller, but it felt smaller. I set down my glass. Daniel and I were good at being married for a long time. Rob waited. We were good parents, good homeowners, good at handling crises, good at dividing responsibilities. I looked toward the window. At some point, we were still doing all of that well, but we weren't really lovers anymore. Rob's face changed only slightly. That sounds lonely. I almost gave him a clever answer. Instead, I said, eventually. He nodded. No diagnosis, no reassurance, no statement about what I deserved, just space. That was unexpectedly attractive. What about Michael? Rob was quiet for a moment. Michael was messy. In what sense? Every sense. Cabinets left open, shoes everywhere. He owned 7 phone chargers and could never find one. He sounds dangerous, terrifying. He smiled, but there was grief under it. Not fresh, integrated. He was also the first person who made being part of a family feel easy for me. I said nothing. Rob looked at his hands. After he died, I think I assumed if something serious happened again, it would feel like that. Immediately? Maybe. That seems unfair. To who? Everyone. He looked up, then he laughed softly. Probably. That was the first moment I saw the flaw beneath the warmth. Rob did not just like closeness. He trusted it. Perhaps too quickly. The realization should have made me more cautious. Instead, it made him more specific, more human. We stayed until the staff began wiping nearby tables with an efficiency that suggested departure. Outside, Providence had gone cool and bright under streetlights. We stood on the sidewalk. Neither of us immediately moved toward our cars. "I had a good time," Rob said. "So did I. You sound surprised. I'm trying not to encourage your confidence. It's too late." He stepped slightly closer, not close enough to touch. Close enough that I became aware of the scent of soap and something faintly woody on his clothes. "I want to see you again." There was nothing coy about it. My pulse shifted. "Before the wedding?" His brows drew together. "Yes." I had not expected the certainty. Rob seemed to notice my hesitation. "We don't have to make this into anything," he said, "but I also don't want to act like we need permission from the calendar." That landed. I had been assuming the wedding should function as a boundary because it was complicated. Rob was asking why complication automatically meant delay. "Saturday," I said. His face changed. That same immediate warmth from when he first saw me. Saturday. 2 nights later, he took me to a small jazz performance in a converted storefront near the river. The music was good. Rob's whispered commentary was not. "You're not supposed to narrate the drummer. I'm appreciating him." "You said he looked personally offended by the symbol." "He does." I covered my mouth so I would not laugh loudly enough to irritate the couple in front of us. Rob leaned toward me. "See? See what? You laugh too." His face was close. Close enough that I could see the silver threaded through his beard. Close enough that my attention dropped, briefly and involuntarily, to his mouth. Rob noticed. He did not move. Neither did I. That restraint did more to me than a dramatic gesture would have. Afterward, we walked without deciding where we were going. The river reflected city lights in broken lines. Rob shoved his hands into his pockets. "You're hard to read." "No, I'm not. You are. You've known me a week. I've been paying attention." There it was again, direct enough to make my stomach tighten. "To what? To whether you're being careful with me or trying to talk yourself out of me." I stopped walking. Rob stopped too. Traffic moved behind us. A bicycle passed. Somewhere across the street, somebody laughed. "Mostly the first one," I said. Rob looked at me. Then he smiled. "That is inconveniently encouraging." I could have said something clever. I could have explained my reservations. I could have discussed Dylan and Aaron, family boundaries, wedding timing, mature decision-making, all the responsible subjects waiting nearby. Instead, I stepped forward and kissed him. Rob made a surprised sound against my mouth. That pleased me more than it should have. His hand came to my upper arm, steady but not pulling. I kissed him again. This time he was ready. When we separated, he looked almost offended. "You did that very suddenly. You were talking too much. I was making an excellent point. You can finish it later." His thumb moved once against my sleeve. "Scott." The way he said my name changed something. Not because it was dramatic. Because for the first time all evening, neither of us was anyone's father. "We're dating," I said. Rob blinked. "Are we?" "If you'd like." His smile came slowly. "I would." "Good. Do we need rules?" "Eventually." He laughed. I looked at him and thought, with surprising clarity, that the dangerous part was no longer whether I wanted Rob Kessler. That question had become embarrassingly simple. The harder question was what wanting him would do to everything already connecting us. We waited 9 days before telling Dylan and Aaron. That was longer than Rob wanted, and shorter than I did. Neither of us said that directly. Instead, we had 3 separate conversations about timing, 2 about whether dating required further definition, and 1 surprisingly heated argument over whether telling our sons at a restaurant would make it impossible for them to react honestly. "It's public," I said. "It's brunch. There are strangers. There are always strangers. Not in my kitchen." Rob looked at me across his workshop desk. "Your kitchen feels more like an interrogation room. That is because people behave correctly there." That sentence explains a lot about you. I ignored him. In the end, we chose Sunday brunch at Dylan and Aaron's apartment because it was familiar territory, and because neither of us wanted the announcement associated with one father's home more than the other's. That distinction mattered to me. I was not sure Rob understood why. He understood enough not to argue. Dylan answered the door wearing sweatpants and holding a wooden spoon. "You're both early." Rob looked at me. "I was told 7 minutes early was acceptable." I said 5. You said under 10. I was compromising. Dylan stared between us. That was the first moment I thought perhaps we had waited too long. Aaron appeared from the kitchen. "Why are you both standing like you're here to tell us someone died?" Rob muttered. "Excellent opening." I elbowed him lightly. Dylan noticed that too. His eyebrows rose. We sat. There were pancakes on the table, fruit in a bowl, coffee, and a bottle of maple syrup shaped like a tiny cabin. I became intensely interested in the syrup. Rob, who had been remarkably brave when asking me to dinner and entirely unafraid when I kissed him, suddenly seemed incapable of speaking. I looked at him. He looked at me. Aaron lowered his fork. "Oh my God." Dylan turned toward him. "What?" Aaron looked at Rob. Then at me. Then back at Rob. "No." Rob exhaled through his nose. "That's not exactly the response I was hoping for." Dylan looked at me. "What is happening?" I put down my coffee. "Rob and I have been seeing each other." Dylan blinked. Aaron closed his eyes. Dylan said, "Seeing each other where?" Rob made a choking sound. I stared at my son. "Dating." Silence. Then Dylan looked at Aaron. Aaron looked at Dylan. Neither spoke. It lasted perhaps 4 seconds. It felt considerably longer. Finally Aaron said, "Okay." Rob leaned back. That sounded threatening. It wasn't. It had texture. Aaron pointed at him. "You cannot critique my reaction." "I'm nervous." That made Dylan laugh. Not much, but enough to loosen something in the room. He looked at me again. "How long?" 2 weeks. 2 weeks? "Approximately," Rob said. 9 days officially. I turned to him. "We are not providing timestamps." "You said approximately." Aaron covered his face. Dylan started laughing harder. The tension broke. Not completely, but enough for everyone to breathe. Then Dylan said, "So you two were dating when we had dinner Tuesday?" "Yes." And nobody said anything. We were determining whether there was anything to say. Rob glanced at me. There was. I felt warmth rise under my collar. Dylan saw it. His expression changed into something I had not seen since he was 16, and discovered adults could embarrass themselves. "Oh, don't." I didn't say anything. "Your face did." Aaron looked between Rob and me. "Are you serious?" The humor left the room again, this time more gently. Rob answered first. "Yes." I looked at him. He did not look at me when he said it. He looked at Aaron. That mattered. "So am I," I said. Aaron nodded slowly. Dylan leaned back. "Okay." I knew my son well enough to hear the question under the word. "What?" He rubbed his palm over the table. "This is going to sound selfish." "Probably." He gave me a look, then continued. "If this gets complicated, Aaron and I can't be in the middle." Rob's expression shifted. Dylan kept going before either of us answered. "I'm not saying don't date. I'm not saying this is weird." Aaron said, "It is a little weird. It is definitely a little weird. Thank you. But if you have a fight, I don't want Aaron telling me what Rob meant, and I don't want to be asking Dad whether Rob is upset. We're about to be married. You're all going to be at every holiday forever, whether this works or not." The practical clarity of it impressed me. It also embarrassed me slightly, because it was exactly the conversation Rob and I should already have had. Aaron looked at his father. "Same for me." Rob nodded. "Fair. No messages through us." "Agreed. No making the wedding awkward." "I have no plans to make your wedding awkward." Aaron stared at him. "You once argued with a caterer for 20 minutes about butter temperature. That was food safety. It was butter. It was wrong." I said. "We will not make the wedding about us." Dylan looked at me. I knew that look too. It meant he believed me, but was checking whether I believed myself. I did. Rob reached for his coffee. Aaron watched him for a moment, then said, "Also, I do not need details." Rob nearly dropped the cup. Dylan laughed. I said, "No one was going to give you details. I wanted it officially stated." "It has been officially stated." "Good," Rob muttered. "This family loves rules," Dylan said. "You're joining the wrong one then." The room went still again, not because Dylan meant anything by it. He had simply said the phrase, "joining." Rob looked at me. I saw the flicker in his expression, pleasure. Something warmer than pleasure. Then caution arrived behind it. I looked away first. We stayed another hour. Nobody celebrated. Nobody objected. Aaron asked Rob whether he had finished the ceremony sign. Dylan showed me an updated seating plan. Life moved around the information. That was exactly what I wanted. Mostly. A week later, Rob hosted a small pre-wedding gathering at his workshop. I had seen the building from outside, but never been inside. It smelled like cut wood, dust, oil, and something faintly metallic. The main room was larger than I expected, with long work tables, clamps along one wall, unfinished pieces under protective cloth, and high windows catching late afternoon light. Rob moved differently there, more certain, not performative, just completely at home. I watched him explain a joint to one of Dylan's friends using his hands, then demonstrate with 2 pieces of scrap wood. There was something deeply attractive about competence, when the competent person had no idea you were watching. Someone beside me said, "You must be Dylan's dad." I turned. An older man with round glasses held out his hand. "Martin, I've been bothering Rob with commissions for 15 years. Scott." Before I could say anything else, Rob appeared at my shoulder. "Scott Delaney," he said. Martin glanced between us. Something in his expression suggested he understood more than Rob had actually said. "Nice to meet you." "You too." Rob was called away almost immediately. I watched him go. Later, near the back of the workshop, I found him adjusting something on the ceremony sign. "You corrected him." Rob looked up. "Who?" "Martin." He frowned, then understood. "He called me Dylan's dad." "You are Dylan's dad." "I know." He set down the tool in his hand. "You also have a name." "That was your reasoning?" "Mostly." I stepped closer. Workshop noise filled the space around us. Conversation, music, chairs scraping across concrete. Rob leaned toward me so I could hear him. His mouth was near my ear. The proximity sent a clean line of awareness down my back. "You noticed," he said. "Yes." I wasn't making a statement. "I know. I just like your name." I turned my face. That put us closer than either of us had planned. For a second, Rob stopped breathing. So did I. We did not kiss. Not because someone interrupted us. Not because we were afraid. Because this was Aaron and Dylan's evening too, and choosing not to turn every moment of wanting into action suddenly felt intimate in its own way. I stepped back. Rob smiled. "Later?" "Yes." When the gathering finally ended, Dylan and Aaron left with the sign. The friends disappeared. Martin was the last client out. I stayed. No task, no wedding discussion, no sons. Rob locked the front door, turned around, and found me waiting beside one of the unfinished tables. His smile changed. For the first time since we had met, there was nothing in the room connecting us, except the fact that I had chosen not to leave. He crossed the workshop slowly, not because he was unsure, because he knew exactly what I was waiting for. When he reached me, he stopped close enough that I could see a streak of sawdust along the side of his shirt. "You stayed. That appears to be what happened. I'm confirming. You like confirming obvious things. I build furniture. Measurements matter. That is the second time you've used furniture to justify questionable behavior. It's versatile." I smiled. Then he kissed me. There was nothing tentative about it this time. His hand settled at my side, steady and warm, and mine went to his shoulder. The workshop around us, half-finished tables, clamps, lights humming overhead, became strangely quiet in my attention. When we pulled apart, he looked at me. "You're thinking." "I usually am." "Dangerous habit." "I'm trying to decide whether kissing in a workshop violates workplace safety." "It absolutely does." "Good," he laughed. Then I kissed him again. The wedding arrived 4 weeks later. By then, Rob and I had become something neither of us had planned, and both of us were learning not to overdefine. We saw each other twice during the week when schedules allowed. Sometimes dinner, sometimes a walk. Once an entire evening at my apartment where Rob spent 40 minutes arguing that one of my dining chairs was structurally insulting. "It is a chair. It is an act of hostility. You sat in it for 2 hours. I'm resilient. Would you like me to get rid of it?" "No." "Why?" "Because then you'd think I was trying to improve your life." I looked at him. He looked back. Then he said, "I mean, I am, but I'm trying to be subtle." I threw a cushion at him. Another night, he cooked at my apartment. He sang badly, not quietly, badly and with commitment. I told him this. "You're just threatened because I understand melody. I work for a symphony, which makes this embarrassing for you." I took the wooden spoon from his hand before he could use it as a microphone. He caught my wrist only long enough to retrieve the spoon, then released me immediately. I noticed that too. Not the touch, the ease, the fact that affection had started becoming ordinary. That frightened me more than the first kiss had. I did not tell him. The weekend before the wedding, we barely saw each other because Dylan had a crisis involving transportation, and Aaron discovered two relatives who had been seated together had not spoken since 2008. Rob sent me a message at 11:30 one night. "I miss your face." I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then typed, "That is an alarmingly romantic sentence." He replied, "I can make it worse. Please don't. Your face is handsome, and I like kissing it." I laughed alone in my kitchen, then answered, "Go to bed, Rob." His response came immediately. "Tomorrow?" I wrote, "Yes." It was the first time I noticed how much I liked the simplicity of that. No logistics, no family reason, just tomorrow. Newport was bright and windy on the wedding day. The venue sat above the water, white chairs facing a stretch of blue-gray ocean that made everything look more cinematic than it had any right to. I arrived early because Dylan had inherited my inability to trust other people with final details. Rob was already there. I saw him from across the lawn. Dark suit, white shirt, no tie yet. He was standing with Aaron near the ceremony space, listening while Aaron said something with both hands moving. Rob smiled. Then he looked up, saw me, stopped listening entirely. I knew, because Aaron turned to see what had distracted him. Across the lawn, Rob's expression changed. Not large, not public, but unmistakable. I felt it in my chest. Dylan appeared beside me. "Don't." "What? You know what? I genuinely do not." You're staring at Rob. I am looking across the venue, at one specific part of it. You have a wedding to supervise. I have a wedding to attend. Even worse. You have free time. He walked away before I could answer. I found Rob 10 minutes later, near a side hallway, after both sons had been dragged into photographs. He was adjusting his cuff. "You keep looking at me," he said. "You noticed. I build furniture. Observation is 90% of the job. That is not what furniture is. Tonight it is." I reached up and straightened his cuff before I thought better of it. Rob went quiet. The touch was ordinary. That was the problem. There was something about being this close to him, while both of us were dressed formally, while our sons were about to marry each other 30 yards away, that made the whole situation feel briefly impossible. "You look good," I said. His eyes lifted to mine. "So do you." "I know." His mouth opened. Then he laughed. "That may be the most attractive thing you've said to me. I thought confidence was your department. I like competition." A coordinator called my name from outside. I stepped back. Rob caught my fingers for less than a second, not to hold me. Just enough to mark the moment. Then he let go. The ceremony belonged entirely to Dylan and Aaron. That mattered to me. It belonged to the way Dylan's voice shook on the first line of his vows, and steadied by the second. It belonged to Aaron laughing through tears when he forgot a sentence he had clearly practiced. It belonged to Daniel, my ex-husband, sitting beside me and reaching across the space between our chairs when Dylan started crying. And it belonged to Rob, looking toward an empty place in the first row, for just one moment after Aaron began his vows. "Michael," I knew without asking. Afterward, I found Rob alone, near the edge of the terrace. He was looking at the water. I stood beside him. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he said, "He would have hated the chairs." I smiled. "Michael? Too decorative. You hated them too." I had valid structural concerns. "Of course." Rob's smile faded. "He would have loved this." I nodded. There was nothing useful to say. That was one of the things I had begun learning from him. Not every feeling needed assistance. Across the lawn, Daniel was dancing badly with Dylan. Rob followed my gaze. "That Daniel?" "Yes. He seems nice." "He is." "That must have been hard." "The divorce?" Rob nodded. "Yes." I considered how to explain something I had spent years simplifying for other people. We loved each other. Then we became very good at everything, except being in love. Rob looked toward the water again. Michael and I never got the chance to find out what happened after 25 years. There was no envy in his voice, just fact. "I'm sorry." Normal volume. I smiled. "I'm sorry." Better. A photographer called for family pictures. Rob groaned. "Here we go." The next hour was exactly the kind of organized chaos I was professionally trained to survive. Parents, sons, extended family, friends, different combinations. At one point, the photographer positioned Rob and me side by side behind Dylan and Aaron. Neither of us reacted. That was another thing that mattered. We did not turn the son's wedding portrait into evidence of our relationship. We were there because we were their fathers. Nothing more was required. Later, during the reception, Rob danced with Aaron. I danced with Dylan. There were speeches. Daniel told a story that embarrassed our son. Rob told one that embarrassed Aaron more effectively. No one mentioned us. No one needed to. Near the end of the evening, Rob found me outside under the terrace lights. The music inside had softened. He looked tired, happy too. "Do you want company tonight?" Not an assumption, not a promise, a question. I looked toward the ballroom, where our sons were still surrounded by people who loved them. Yes. That night we did not talk about the future. We did not discuss what the wedding made us. We did not use anyone else's vows to define our relationship. We went back to my hotel room, closed the door on everyone else's expectations, and belonged only to ourselves for a while. In the morning, Rob woke before me. I found him at the window wearing yesterday's shirt, holding the curtains apart with 2 fingers. "What are you doing?" "Checking the weather." "You have a phone." "I like windows." "Of course you do." He turned. His hair was a mess. His face was unguarded in a way I had not seen before. For one dangerous second, I pictured an entire ordinary life built from mornings like that. Then I stopped myself. Rob noticed. Not the thought, the retreat. He did not ask about it. Instead, he said, "Breakfast?" I appreciated him enormously for that. 3 weeks later, the wedding was no longer organizing anyone's life. That was when the real problem began. Aaron stopped going to Rob's workshop every weekday. He had been handling scheduling, client communications, and a dozen small administrative tasks while preparing for the wedding. After the honeymoon, he started a new position with an architectural firm downtown. Rob was proud of him. He said so constantly. He also began inviting me everywhere. Sunday dinner with Aaron and Dylan, a workshop cookout, his sister's birthday, lunch with an old family friend, another dinner with Aaron and Dylan because they were trying a new place on Hope Street. Each invitation was reasonable. That was why it took me too long to notice the accumulation. I liked his family. I liked Aaron. I loved my son. But by the 4th week after the wedding, nearly every hour Rob and I spent together seemed to have somebody related to us standing nearby. One Saturday, Rob invited me to a cookout at the workshop. I went. His sister, Laura, was there. So were Aaron and Dylan. 2 clients, a cousin, someone named Jeff, whom Rob introduced as basically family, which appeared to mean they had known each other since 1989. At one point, Laura pulled me aside near the drinks table. "He likes you." I almost laughed. That would be convenient. "No, I mean he likes you." I understood. She studied me. "You're different from the men he dated after Michael." I did not want that conversation. Not because she had done anything wrong, because I could feel myself being placed into a history I had not chosen. "How?" Laura shrugged. "He brings you around." There it was. The statement bothered me, not because it was inaccurate, because part of me knew Rob would hear it as a compliment. I was still thinking about it 3 days later, when I invited him to my apartment for dinner. He arrived with bread and a bottle of wine. No family. No additional guests. I relaxed immediately. That should have told me something. We ate. We argued about whether a particular violinist had technically ruined a recording Rob liked. He told me I had professional snobbery. I told him he had no standards. He kissed me to interrupt the argument. It worked. Later, lying beside him in the dark, he said, "Laura likes you." "I know." "She told you?" "Yes." "Was she normal about it?" "No." He groaned. "What did she say?" "That I was different." He was quiet. I felt his arm shift beside me. "She means well." "I know. You hate that phrase." "I don't hate it." "You say it like you do." I turned toward him. "Do you think I'm different?" "Yes." The answer came immediately. I had not expected that. "How?" Rob was quiet long enough that I almost told him he did not need to answer. Then he said, "You don't seem to need me to make a place for you." I did not know what to do with that. "Is that good?" "I think so." The uncertainty in his voice stayed with me. 2 nights later, we were supposed to have dinner alone. At 5:30, Rob texted, Aaron and Dylan are doing their housewarming thing tonight. We can stop by first. I stared at the message. We can. Not would you like to. We can. My irritation was immediate enough that I knew it had been waiting. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Then my phone rang. Rob. I answered. Hi. Did you see my message? Yes. So. I looked around my office. Most of the building had emptied. I thought tonight was ours. A pause. It is. No. It was. Scott. It's an hour at their place. I know. So we go for an hour, and then dinner. I heard nothing unreasonable in what he was saying. That made me more frustrated. Rob. What? Lately everything we do starts with somebody we're related to. Silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, the warmth had left his voice. That's not true. It almost was. And suddenly I understood why that scared me. I'm not saying we never see them. I know. I'm saying I thought tonight was different. It can still be different. That's not the same thing. Another pause. I could hear workshop noise behind him. A compressor kicked on somewhere, then stopped. Rob said, You don't want to go? No. All right. The answer came too quickly. Not angry. Not generous either. Just shut. I stood from my desk. What does that mean? It means you don't want to go. Rob, what do you want me to say? There it was. The first real edge I had heard from him. I stared through the office window at the darkening city. I want you to understand why. I'm trying. No, you're solving the schedule. That's unfair. Is it? Yes. His voice sharpened. I asked if we could stop by their housewarming. You said no. Fine. But now apparently, I'm doing something bigger than that. I closed my eyes. He was right. That was part of the problem. The housewarming was not the problem. It was just the first thing solid enough to point at. I don't want every part of us to become family. Silence. Then Rob said, very carefully, They are our family. I know that. They just got married. I was there. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? He exhaled. I mean they're not strangers. I'm dragging you around to meet. I know. They're Dylan and Aaron. I know. Then why are you talking like spending time with them is some kind of contamination? That is not what I said. It's what it sounds like. The word hit harder than it should have. Contamination. I looked down at the budget papers scattered across my desk and suddenly felt tired. This is exactly why I didn't want to do this by phone. You started it by phone. You called. Because you deleted 3 texts. I frowned. How do you know I deleted anything? You go quiet when you're editing. That irritated me, because it was accurate. I'm not doing this now. Good. The line went dead a moment later. I stared at the phone. Then I sat back down, even though there was no work left that required me. I did not go to the housewarming. Rob went without me. At 8:15, Dylan sent a photograph to the family group chat. Aaron was holding a bottle of champagne. Daniel had apparently stopped by. Rob stood near the kitchen counter, smiling at something outside the frame. I looked at the picture longer than I wanted to admit. Then I put my phone face down. Rob did not call that night. The next morning he sent, "Can we talk tomorrow?" I answered yes. No heart, no joke, no attempt to repair the atmosphere through tone. That was probably healthier than I wanted it to be. Saturday afternoon, I drove to the workshop. Rob was alone. The front room looked different without people in it. Larger, more industrial, less warm. He was sanding the edge of a long walnut tabletop when I came in. He turned off the machine. Neither of us smiled. Hi. He took off his protective glasses and set them down. You want coffee? No. Right. He wiped his hands on a cloth. For a few seconds we just stood there. Then Rob said, "You go first." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because he had clearly decided on that sentence before I arrived. I don't want to go first. Scott, I'm serious. What does that mean? It means you already think I'm the one with the issue. His expression hardened. I didn't say that. You said go first, because you're the one who told me everything we do has become family. It has. No, it hasn't. Rob, we had dinner Tuesday. Alone. Yes. You stayed at my place Thursday. Alone. Yes. We went to the market last Saturday and ran into Aaron. That was an accident. Then we had lunch with him. Because he was there. Exactly. Rob stared at me. I heard my own voice and hated how precise I sounded, like I was presenting evidence, like I had built a case instead of noticing a feeling. Rob rubbed a hand over his beard. You know what? Fine. Let's say you're right. I've been including you too much. That is not what I said. It's close enough. No, it isn't. Then say what you mean without turning it into a spreadsheet. That landed. I felt my shoulders tighten. Sometimes I can't tell whether I'm your boyfriend or the spare father who happens to sleep with you. The second the sentence left my mouth, I knew it was wrong. Not entirely wrong, but crueler than what I meant. Rob went completely still. I wanted to pull the words back. I did not. His voice was quiet when he said, "That's what you think?" "No. You literally just said it." I said sometimes. Great distinction. Rob, no. You wanted me to understand. He walked away from me, toward the work table, then turned back. Aaron leaving the shop has been strange. I said nothing. He was here almost every day for 4 years. Not because I forced him, because he wanted to be. Then he got married, took that job, and suddenly he's building a life that doesn't include being here all the time. That's good. I know it's good. I didn't say you didn't. You keep doing that. Doing what? Talking like if I feel one thing, I must secretly believe the opposite. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Rob looked exhausted now. I miss him, he said. I'm happy for him. And I miss him. Both things are true. I understand. Do you? Yes. And maybe I have been filling some of that space too fast. Maybe I look around and think, Scott can come. Scott would like this. Scott should meet these people. His voice dropped. Maybe some of that is because I like having you there. I felt something inside me soften. Then he added, but you don't get to turn that into me confusing you with my son. That wasn't what I meant. Then stop saying things you don't mean because they sound accurate. That hurt. Mostly because it was also accurate. I looked away. Rob was breathing hard now, not dramatically, just angry enough that he had stopped controlling it. After a moment he said, "Do you know what else I've noticed?" I looked back at him. "I know your ex. I know half your family. I've met people Aaron and Dylan know. I know where you buy groceries because you complain about the parking. That seems unrelated. I have never met one person from the symphony." I went still. Rob nodded once. "Exactly. My work is separate." "From what?" "From this." His face changed. "This. You know what I mean." "No, I actually don't. My job isn't my family." "Exactly." He stepped closer. "I'm not in that either." The words landed cleanly. No drama, no raised voice, just fact. I thought of every time I had gone to his workshop, every friend of his I had met, his sister, his clients, his son, his son's husband. Then I thought of donor receptions I had attended alone, opening nights, staff dinners, colleagues who knew Daniel because Daniel had once belonged to the fully integrated version of my life. None of them knew Rob. Not really. "That's different." Rob laughed once, without humor. "Of course it is. I don't hide you." "I didn't say hide. You're implying it." "No. I'm saying you want our relationship protected from becoming a role, and I understand that." He paused. "But sometimes you protect it so well, I'm not sure it exists anywhere, except when the door is closed." I had no immediate answer. That made me angry. Not at him. At the fact that he had found something I had not already considered. "My marriage became a system," I said. "I know. Everything was shared. Friends, holidays, schedules, parents, work events. Every part of life became one machine. And you think that happened because you went to things together?" "No. Then what?" I looked down. "I don't know." That was the first honest thing I had said in several minutes. Rob's expression changed. The anger did not disappear, but something around it loosened. "I just know I didn't notice when Daniel stopped being the person I wanted and became the person I coordinated with." Rob leaned back against the work table, and I don't know when Michael and I would have changed if he'd lived. His voice was quieter now. "We didn't get that part." I looked at him. "So maybe I overvalue overlap, because that's what I had. Maybe. And maybe you undervalue it because of what you lost." I almost corrected him, then stopped. "Maybe." We stood there with 2 imperfect answers between us. No elegant conclusion arrived. Rob looked toward the front windows. "I'm not breaking up with you." I blinked. "That's an odd thing to announce. You look like you're preparing for a negotiation." I am not. You absolutely are. Despite myself, I smiled. It disappeared quickly. Rob said, but I don't want us filling every free hour, because we're afraid of what happens if we don't. I agree. And I don't want you coming to family things because you think I need you there. I agree. He looked at me. I also don't want to be the man you only let into the part of your life marked private. I started to say I understood. He saw it coming. No, I stopped. Don't say the clean answer. The sting of that sat between us. Then I nodded. All right. Rob waited. I'll think about it. That I believe. We did not kiss before I left. We did not need a physical gesture to prove we were still together. At the door, Rob said, Tuesday? I turned. What? Dinner. Just us. I considered my calendar. I can't Tuesday. For a second, the old version of the moment hung there. Then Rob nodded. Wednesday? I checked. Wednesday works. Good. I walked out into the afternoon with no resolution. Exactly. But also with something I had not had when I arrived. A problem that belonged to both of us, and no excuse to pretend only one of us had created it. Wednesday dinner was almost aggressively ordinary. No family, no workshop emergency, no conversation about whether we were doing the relationship correctly. Rob complained about parking. I told him he had chosen the restaurant. He said that did not make parking morally acceptable. We ate. We disagreed about dessert. Then we went back to my apartment and spent 20 minutes trying to watch a movie, before accepting that neither of us was paying attention to it. The argument at the workshop did not vanish. It simply stopped being the only thing in the room. That helped. Over the next 2 weeks, something changed in Rob's schedule. At first I thought it was accidental. Then one Saturday morning he called while I was making breakfast. I hired someone. I lowered the mug I was holding. For what? Production coordination. At the workshop? Unless you've secretly opened another one. That seems unlikely. I interviewed 4 people. You interviewed people? I am capable of professional behavior. I've seen very little evidence. He ignored that. Her name is Maya. She used to manage production for a cabinet company in Cranston. She knows scheduling, inventory, vendors, all the things Aaron was doing badly, because I was paying him partly in guilt. I smiled. You said that, not me. I know. There was a pause. Aaron came by yesterday. How was that? Good. The answer was simple. I waited. He stayed an hour, complained about my filing system, left, and nothing. I understood what he was telling me. He had let his son visit without turning the visit into a return. That sounds healthy. Don't ruin it by naming it. I laughed. Rob said, Dinner Monday? I have a staff event. Tuesday? Tuesday works. Good. No silence. No slight withdrawal in his voice. Just Tuesday. I stood alone in my kitchen after the call ended, and realized that was the first change. The second one had to be mine. That proved more difficult. The symphony's fall donor reception was 3 days later. It was the kind of event I had attended for years without thinking about the personal architecture of it. Board members, major donors, musicians, administrative staff, people who had known me for a decade and could tell you exactly how I handled a venue crisis, but could not tell you the name of anyone I had dated since Daniel. The invitation sat in my inbox while I worked through 2 scheduling problems and an insurance issue. At 4:30, I picked up my phone. Put it down. Picked it up again. Rob answered on the 3rd ring. Everything okay? Yes. You sound suspicious. That is not a useful response. It's accurate. I looked through my office window at the empty hall. I have a reception Friday. Congratulations. Do you want to come? Silence. Not long. Long enough, Rob said. To the symphony? Yes. With your people? They are not my people. That sounds exactly like something you'd say about your people. I smiled despite myself. Yes. With my people. Another pause. Then softer. Are you sure? The question irritated me for half a second. Then I realized he was not asking me to prove anything. He was giving me room to change my mind. Yes. Then I'd like to. Friday evening, Rob arrived wearing the same dark suit he had worn at the wedding, this time with a tie that looked as though someone else had chosen it. I opened my apartment door and stared. What? Who tied that? My sister. I knew it. That's insulting. It's excellent. Exactly. I stepped aside. Rob came in. He stopped. You're nervous. I host these constantly. That wasn't what I said. I picked up my coat. I'm not nervous. You reorganized the mail. I looked toward the table. The mail was, in fact, arranged by size. I was cleaning. You're adorable when you're lying badly. Get out. We're leaving. Exactly. The reception filled the concert hall lobby with the usual mixture of expensive clothing, strategic laughter, and people pretending not to check name tags. For the first 20 minutes, I was working even though technically I was not supposed to be. A sponsor had a question. A board member needed reassurance about next month's programming. One of the musicians stopped me to discuss a rehearsal schedule. Rob stayed near enough to be findable, and far enough not to become another responsibility. That mattered. Every few minutes I caught sight of him talking to someone, not performing, not trying to prove he belonged, just being Rob. At one point, I looked across the room and found him watching me. There was something unexpectedly intimate about it. He had seen me as Dylan's father. He had seen me at dinner, in bed, annoyed, defensive, half asleep on a Sunday morning. But this was the first time he had seen the part of my life that had existed long before he arrived, and would continue, whether he stayed or not. He smiled. I felt the answer before I had words for it. I wanted him there. Not everywhere. There. That night. Because I had asked. A woman from our development office approached me. Scott. Marianne. Her eyes moved toward Rob, who had just joined us. I could have taken the easy path. Friend. Guest. Rob Kessler. All technically true. Instead I said, Marianne, this is Rob Kessler, my boyfriend. The word felt strangely physical, not frightening, just solid. Rob went very still beside me. Marianne smiled. Nice to meet you. You too. She immediately began telling him about a donor who wanted a custom music stand. Rob recovered within seconds. He spent 5 minutes discussing walnut versus maple, while I stood beside him pretending my pulse had not changed. When Marianne left, Rob looked at me. I raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing. That was definitely something. He smiled. I like your name too. I understood. Later, after the reception, we walked several blocks, instead of going straight to the car. Rob kept his hands in his coat pockets. I liked seeing you there. At work? Being yourself, where I'm not necessary. I glanced at him. That is unexpectedly romantic. I can ruin it. Please don't. He nodded toward the street ahead. I'm trying something new. I laughed. Several weeks passed. Nothing transformed dramatically. That may have been the best part. Maya stayed at the workshop. Aaron came and went, according to his own life. Dylan and Aaron began settling into marriage without asking either of us to participate in every decision. Rob still invited me to family dinners. Sometimes I went, sometimes I did not. I invited Rob to another concert. He declined because he had promised his sister dinner. Neither refusal became evidence. One Sunday, Dylan called while I was folding laundry. Are you and Rob okay? I stopped. Why? You used to both show up everywhere. Now sometimes only one of you does. I smiled despite myself. We're okay. Good. A pause. Then Dylan added, that was me asking once. I'm not managing anything. I know. I'm serious. So am I. Great. He hung up. I stood there with a shirt in my hands and laughed. Maybe that was part of the adjustment too. Letting the people around us discover that closeness did not have to look like constant attendance. A week later, Rob and I had dinner with Daniel. That had been Rob's suggestion. Not because he needed to prove something, because Daniel and I were still part of Dylan's life, and avoiding each other indefinitely would have been stranger. Daniel liked him. Of course he did. At one point I went to the restroom and returned to find them discussing me. I stopped beside the table. No. Daniel looked innocent. We weren't discussing you. You both turned silent. Rob said. We were discussing orchestras. You hate orchestras. I like some instruments. Daniel laughed. I sat down. Later, as we walked home, I asked what they had actually discussed. Rob said, he told me you used to label leftovers by day. He lies. He showed me a photograph. I stopped walking. Daniel has retained evidence? Apparently your divorce settlement was incomplete. I laughed so hard I had to lean briefly against a wall. Rob watched me. That look again. Not father. Not operations director. Not former husband. Scott. I had spent years protecting different parts of my life from becoming one system. I was beginning to understand that integration was not the same as disappearance. There was a difference between letting someone enter your world and handing them ownership of it. There was also a difference between being invited and being assumed. Rob was learning that. So was I. Near the beginning of December, we attended a neighborhood fundraiser together. Someone I vaguely recognized stopped me near the door. "You're Dylan's dad, right?" "I am." He smiled toward Rob. "And you're Aaron's—" "Rob," I said. The man looked at me. I continued. "We're together." Rob's face changed beside me. Not shock, not triumph, something quieter. The man nodded. "Well, nice to meet you, Rob." "You too." Outside, Rob bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. "That was smooth." It was a sentence. "You're getting reckless." "I'll recover." We walked half a block before he said, "Aaron and Dylan are doing dinner Sunday. Want to come?" I thought about it. Actually thought about it. Not what would be easiest. Not what declining might prove. Not what accepting might imply. "I can't Sunday." Rob nodded. "Monday?" I looked at him. "Monday." He smiled. Then he reached for my hand. Not because anyone was watching. Not because our sons had married. Not because we were proving that two families had become one. Because we were walking somewhere together and he wanted to touch me. I let my fingers close around his. For years, I had thought the danger in love was becoming so entangled with another person that you could no longer see where one life ended and the other began. Rob had spent years believing almost the opposite, that love became safest when everybody he cared about could fit around the same table. Neither of us had been entirely wrong. That was what made it difficult, and worth learning. At the corner, Rob stopped. "What?" "Nothing. You stopped walking." "I know. Why?" He looked down the street, then back at me. "I was going to ask where you wanted to go. That seems reasonable." "Do you?" I considered it. Not what would be easiest. Not what he expected. Not what being a good father, boyfriend, host, or former husband required. Just what I wanted. "There's a place by the river." Rob nodded. "I was hoping you'd say the bakery. We can disagree." His mouth curved. Apparently. I started walking toward the river. Rob came with me. Not because our sons had made us family. Not because either of us needed filling. Because I had chosen a direction, and he had chosen to come.